Hello, good afternoon. Welcome again to Introduction to Philosophy. So today in this video, I'll be discussing Heidegger's views on death. But before I start, I would like to make an announcement. So you may have noticed that the online evaluations for this course have just opened up a couple of days ago. So please take some time to do the online evaluations for this course and give me some feedback about this course. Thank you. Okay, end of announcement. Okay, now we can start talking about Heidegger. This video will probably be a little bit longer than other videos I've done because there's quite a lot of stuff to talk about when we are talking about Heidegger and especially about death. But before that, I want to again briefly recap Heidegger's place in in philosophy and in the existentialist tradition. So you might recall that last week when we started talking about existentialism, we were talking about Sartre, and I mentioned that the two major existentialist philosophers that we're going to look at in this course are Jean-Paul Sartre and Martin Heidegger. Sartre and Heidegger, they are contemporaries, as you can see. Their lives overlap a lot. I'm not sure if they actually met. I don't think so. But Sartre himself was definitely very heavily influenced by Heidegger's works. Although they have very important disagreements and differences, as you will see soon enough. Now, from looking at Sartre last week, you may already have gotten the sense that existentialism is a rather different kind of philosophical movement, a different kind of philosophy from the other Western philosophers we have studied earlier in the course. The main difference is that existentialism is mainly focused on subjective experience. So it is not content with simply analyzing concepts and trying to make sense of the universe in a detached, impersonal kind of way. Rather, it tries to understand the meaning of human existence. It tries to understand what the universe is about through the lens of subjective lived human experience. In other words, through the lens of my experience and your experience. So in this sense, existentialism, is actually a very refreshing and life-affirming philosophy. And I hope I've managed to convey some of this life-affirming refreshingness in what I'm saying in these videos. Okay, so this is by way of an overview of existentialism. Now, so we're going to talk about Heidegger's view of death today, and you can see that being focused with subjective lived human experience, it is only natural for existentialism to be focused on death as well, because death is the end of a human life. It marks the end of the very possibility of our personal subjective experience. So in that sense, it is only natural that an existentialist would be focused and interested in the question of death. The existentialist isn't really very concerned about questions like what happens after death or whether there is an afterlife. These are not questions that the existentialist is concerned about. What the existentialist is more concerned about is the question of how does our awareness of death, and how does the fact that we are beings that must all die, how does that brute fact impact our lived subjective experience as human beings who are in this world? So the existentialist, as you can see, understands death in the context of its impact on lived subjective human experience. So anyway, and Heidegger is also famous for his views on death. So in this video, I'm going to spend some time, talking about his views on death. But before I do that, let me just briefly recap what we went over last week. So, and you will see why this is important in a little bit. So here's one very quick and easy way of summarizing Sartre's view in a very nutshell kind of way. So you can see that according to Sartre, I am, well, imagine this is you or me. So you are a being, a human being, and by being alive, by being a conscious being in the world, you actually bring nothingness into the world. Yeah, remember that Sartre said that human being is the being through whom nothingness comes into the world. So by bringing nothingness into the world, you bring consciousness and value and freedom into a world that is otherwise inert and indifferent. So by doing this, by setting forth this view, Sartre has actually introduced a couple of interesting divisions. First, he has introduced a division between conscious human being or conscious human experience and things in the world. So, to give an example, this dry erase marker is a thing in the world. It is inert, it is not conscious, it does not have freedom. If all human beings were to suddenly disappear from the world, the dry erase marker would still be around. So it is an inert thing in the world. But when human beings come into the world, or because human beings are in the world, they are able to make a difference to how this dry erase marker is used in the world. They are able to infuse this dry erase marker with meanings, with roles and functions that it probably otherwise wouldn't have. Because if human beings weren't in this world, if there were no consciousness and no nothingness in this world, this dry erase marker probably wouldn't even be a dry erase marker. It would probably just be an inert black and white plastic object. So you can see that Sartre believes that human being plays a very important role in bringing consciousness and nothingness into the world. And in so doing, Sartre has introduced a division between consciousness and things that are in the world. He has introduced a distinction between something that is conscious and free and something that is simply inert and is just there. Or in more technical language, we could say that he has introduced a distinction between human being, which is being for itself, and and inert things, which are just being in itself. Now, the other division that Sartre has introduced in putting forth this view is that he has also introduced a distinction between the thinking subject, that's you, versus the world. So Sartre's view is a very two-sided view, in the sense that if you read Being and Nothingness and think about what Sartre is saying, at all times he maintains this division between you and the world. Or to put it in more spectacular terms, you versus the world. So it's always you versus the world. It's always you as a thinking or conscious subject versus the world. Now, Heidegger thinks that all of this is simply wrong. To make it even more graphic, Heidegger thinks that all of this is simply wrong. Why is it wrong? Why is it wrong? Well, Heidegger thinks that it is wrong because we don't actually begin our life in this world by thinking of ourselves as a thinking subject that is separate from the world. That comes later, after you have become conscious, after you have learned about what things there are in the world. But before we became this thinking subject, we actually existed in a much more basic and primordial state. So Heidegger thinks that this is wrong because this picture is at best an incomplete picture, incomplete story of how we are in the world as human beings. So what is Heidegger's answer to the question of how we are in the human beings? Well, the answer is quite simply found in one word: Dasein. Dasein is a German word that simply means there being. So what Heidegger is trying to say is that before you were even a thinking subject, before you were even able to think about yourself versus the world, before you were able to think in these dualistic terms, you are first of all a being that is here or there. Right now, I might think of myself as a thinking subject that is saying things to you as other thinking subject. But Heidegger would say that this way of seeing the world is actually a really incomplete way of seeing the world. Because before I'm a thinking subject, I'm first of all a being that is here, or there. In your case, you are there and I'm here. So I'm first of all a being that is here. And then once I'm here as a being that is here, then I try to figure out, what the meaning of my existence is about. So Dasein is first of all as a being that is here or there. I am first of all a being that is thrown into a world. I am a thrown being in the world. And then after I'm thrown into the world, I then try to figure out what is the meaning of my existence. Why does he use the word thrown? Well, he chooses the word thrown because you are thrown in the world in the sense that you don't have a choice as to many of the circumstances of your world. You didn't choose to be born in this particular time to that particular family. You didn't choose to be born, in a particular set of economic circumstances or in a particular geographical location. So you are just thrown into existence. Well, actually, you didn't even choose to be born in the first place. Period. So you are just thrown into this world, and then once you are thrown into this world, you have to, kind of muddle through and figure out what you are about, just like me. So Heidegger believes that this has to be the starting point for any kind of meaningful existential philosophy. Any meaningful existential philosophy must first recognize that we are a Dasein that is thrown being in the world, that is thrown into the world, so to speak. So any talk of thinking subject or anything like that has to come after Dasein. So we have to start from the beginning. We have to start with Dasein. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. To say that Dasein is a being in the world that is thrown in the world is a little bit, vague. We still need more things to get us going. So how do we start? How do we go on from here? Well, let's ask ourselves a few questions about Dasein before we go on. So first, where is Dasein? Well, I think we just answered that question. Dasein is being in the world. You are where you are. You are in that place where your world is, whatever world means to you. What is Dasein stance in the world? In other words, what is your basic mode of being in the world? The answer is Dasein is being ahead of itself. Why is that so? You see, wherever you are in the world, whatever your world is like, you are always, moving forward and projecting yourself forward. You are always making plans for the future. You are always, intending. You always have intentions to do things in the future. Whether the future is 10 years from now or just 5 minutes from now, you are always making plans for the future. You are always projecting ahead of yourself. So you are a being ahead of yourself. Or Heidegger would say that Dasein is being ahead of itself. And this being ahead of itself, this projecting forward, is a very, very key part of what it means to be Dasein, or what it means to be human for that matter. Because without this, I don't think you can be recognizably human. Okay, the third question is, what is Dasein like in the world? So given that we are in the world, given that we are always projecting ourselves forward, how are we? What do we use as the background against which we are projecting ourselves forward? What are the material we are working with, so to speak? So according to Heidegger, Dasein is being alongside entities encountered in the world. We are always working with things and people that we encounter in the world. So and this could be something as simple as me using a dry erase marker to do stuff, or if you are depending on your profession, you might be a carpenter and you are using you are using your tools to make stuff in your world, in your carpentry profession, so as to make a living for yourself. And then in the course of making a living for yourself, you are working and dealing with other people in your life. You are also working and dealing with your with family members. So you have certain attitudes of concern towards things in the world. You have certain attitudes of solicitude towards the people in your life. The word solicitude is a little bit old-fashioned. Check it out in the dictionary. It means something like having caring relations towards people in your life, and this can include people that are really close to you, like your family members, or it could include people that are just strangers or mere acquaintances. One way or the other, you do actually have some kind of human relation with them, and this human relation is called solicitude. So, whether you are concerned about things, the things that you do for a living, things in the world, or whether you are in a state of solicitude with regards to people around you, in both cases, one way or the other, you are a being that is alongside entities encountered in the world. Okay, so far so good, I hope. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but try to take this slowly, try to stay with me. Okay, so let's try to put all these things together and see what we get. Because what Heidegger would say is that if you put all of these things together, then you can get the total structure of what lived human existence is like. You can get the total structure of what it is like to be in this world, to be a Dasein in this world. Okay, get ready for this. According to Heidegger, the total structure is this, and I'm just combining everything that I just said in the last slide. So to be a Dasein is to be a being ahead of itself, being in the world, as being alongside entities encountered in the world. You are ahead of yourself because you're always projecting forward in doing things in your position in this world. You are being in the world because you are living in whatever world you are living in, and you are being alongside entities encountered in the world because as a being in the world that's projecting yourself forward, you are always projecting yourself forward in the context of things that you're working with in your life, or people that you're dealing with in your life, whether those people are loved ones or strangers. So this entire structure, Heidegger calls this entire structure care. So care doesn't mean, care isn't just this normal sentimental use of the word that we are familiar with. I mean, it doesn't just mean care in the sense of I care for you or you care for me. Care basically means is basically the sum of all the things that you are in this world. You care for all of these things because you are thrown into this world and you have a stake in these things. In a sense, they keep you grounded in the world. So you care for all these things. And so care is actually very central to what you are as a Dasein. Or in more plain language, you could also say that care is very central to what you are as a human. As a human living in this world. Okay, so now we are finally ready to talk about death. Oh, I forgot to mention that all of that was preparation for us to, think about death in Heidegger's terms. So now we are finally ready to talk about death. So what is death? Well, here's one question to think about. So given Dasein structure, given this very big structure of ourselves as being ahead of ourselves in the world, that is also alongside things. Given Dasein structure, given the structure of our existence, how are we to understand Dasein's end? Or how are we to understand our own death, given the structure of our existence in the world? It's a difficult question, but let me start by saying a couple of things about death. Well, a good way to start would be to say something about what death is not. Well, none of us have died before, unless you believe in reincarnation. But let's set that aside. As far as we know, in this life, none of us have died before. So none of us have died before. Um, but we have seen people around us who have died. Maybe you have had family who have died. You may even have been around those family members when they were dying, and you had to tend to their needs or care for them when as they were leaving this world. You may have to see to a whole bunch of very practical concerns in the course of their dying. You make sure they are comfortable. You have to see to the funeral arrangements and things like that. So there's a sense in which death may be seen as a practical problem to be overcome. But death, but that is just the death of other people. Our own death or my own death cannot simply be a practical problem for me, because I cannot, even if I manage to see to my own death, even if I manage to see to my funeral arrangements ahead of time, even if I manage to write my will 50 years in advance of the time I die, even if I take care of all of these practical problems, there is still one very central thing that cannot be taken care of this way, which is, how do I face death? The question of how I may face death in a way that is real and authentic cannot be taken care of just like any other practical problems. I can probably find books and resources online to tell me how to see to my own funeral arrangements, or how to write a will, or things like that. But there is no manual or resource online that can tell me how to face my own death. There's no instruction manual for this. So it's not a practical problem. It's something deeper and bigger than a practical problem. It's also not a theoretical problem that I can solve. So I can't solve the problem of my own death in a way in which I can't solve a problem of my own death like I can solve a mathematical problem or a scientific problem. So it's not as if there is a solution to the problem of my own death in the way in which there is a solution to a difficult mathematical problem. So no amount of taking calculus classes or anything like that will bring you any closer to being able to confront the sheer reality of your own death. So death, to sum up, death is neither a practical problem nor a theoretical problem. So what kind of a problem is it? Well, Heidegger would say that it is something that is a problem that is much, much deeper than that. It is an existential problem. So now that we have understood what death is not, maybe we can try to see if we can understand what death is as an existential problem. So here's something useful that Heidegger has provided us with. There are at least 4 things that we can say about our own death. First, death is Dasein's ownmost potentiality. What do I mean by that? Well, it is the one thing in life that is the most intimately my own. I will definitely die. There's no doubt about that. When I die, my death will be the end of me. There will be, it will be the end of the very possibility of my being here, or to put it more technically, is the end of the possibility of any possibility. Or Heidegger would say it is the absolute impossibility of any possibility of Dasein's being. Very wordy, but I think you get the idea. So in any case, it is your ownmost potentiality. It is the one thing that is most intimately linked to your very basis of your existence. It is non-relational. What do I mean? What does this mean? It means that, for one thing, it means that nobody can represent you in dying. Nobody can die for you. Dying is something you have to go through for yourself. nobody wants to die alone, I think. But even if you surround yourself with many, many friends and relatives at the moment of your death, it still remains true that none of these friends and relatives can make the journey with you. You have to go to the other side, if there is an other side, by yourself. So, in that sense, it is non-relational. It is something that you have to. It is something that individuates you in the most utter and complete and thorough way. Okay, number 3. Death is not to be outstripped. It is the thing that will come. It is the thing that makes all of your life, all of your possibilities possible. It is the thing that will come at the end of all of your life's possibilities. Nothing is more possible than death. Which is also to say that nothing is more certain than death. And that brings us to the last point. So nothing is more certain than death because we are going to die. There's no getting around that. But at the same time, it is indefinite. Most of us do not know exactly when we are going to die. Well, actually, nobody knows exactly when they are going to die. So in that sense, it is indefinite. Death could come tomorrow, or it could come 50 years from now. But the interesting thing is that the indefiniteness actually makes death more certain, not less. So death there is a certain paradoxical nature to it, in a sense that it is certain yet indefinite, and yet its indefiniteness only serves to underline the certainty of death even more. Okay, so now that we know all of these things about death, which are actually pretty obvious if you think about it, but anyway, now that we know all of these things about death, what are we going to do about it? I mean, what is the how should we go about facing it as human beings? Well, here's something else that Heidegger talks about: anxiety or angst in the face of being in the world. Now, we all have experienced anxiety from time to time, and anxiety is not the same as fear, because fear is always fear in the face of something very, very definite and very, very specific. So, for example, I might fear that I wouldn't be able to get to class on time tomorrow. I might fear that my car might not work tomorrow. I might fear that I suffer from some terrible illness. Or, if you are a caveman, you might fear the saber-toothed tiger that's running towards you. So in all of these cases, fear is always directed towards something very specific. You can always do something about the fear. You can either run away, or you can tackle the thing head on and try to resolve the problem. But anxiety is different. Unlike fear, anxiety is always is directed at nothing in particular in the world. It's just this vague sense of unease. It's just this free-floating sense of unease that is not directed at anything in particular. If you have felt anxiety before, you will know totally what I mean by all of that. So, why do we have anxiety? I mean, you may say that you have anxiety because of some kind of displaced fear of this or that or whatever. But Heidegger thinks that it is actually deeper than that. He believes that anxiety is ultimately anxiety in the face of being in the world. But why should we feel anxious? Why should we feel anxious about just because we are in the world? Well, we feel anxious because we feel that there is something that is somehow undone. There is something that is somehow yet undone. There is something that is somehow